Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Today I've got some more Dogman subscriber encounters. Looks like we hit a home run last time, so we'll just go for a grand slam today. Before we get into these encounters, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. I also started a GoFundMe page to help raise some money for urbex, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting equipment. If that's anything that you're willing to help with, that link is also in the description below. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with these subscriber Dogman encounters. Shall we? Jeffrey, I have an encounter to share with you. It's definitely an auditory encounter, as we never saw the creature. When I was 10 years old, my father and grandfather purchased 56 acres of land out in East Texas between Lake Fork and Fort Tawakoni. The land was purchased from a wheelchair-bound man whose wife took over tending to the farm with the help of sharecroppers from Mexico. They lived in a little shack on the back 5 acres of the land right next to a pond. We called it a lake house. My parents purchased a mobile home, but it would be a few months before it was delivered. My younger brother and I lived with our grandparents in an old pier and beam farmhouse for the remainder of the summer and into the beginning of the school year, so we'd be able to start school. Despite the farmhouse's dilapidated condition, it had a brand new, full enclosed back porch that housed a washer and dryer, deep freezers, and storage units. There were 2 screen doors on the opposite ends of the porch. One led to a carport and the other towards the goat yard and crop fields. I've always been a very adventurous type of girl, so at 10 years old this place was a dream. My brother and I had a tree house in every tree we could manage. We spent all our time when we weren't helping harvest crops playing in the creek and the ponds on the property. The main road ran in front of our property. About a quarter mile down there was a massive hill with a bridge at the bottom, just going over the creek. Once you came up to the other side of the hill, there was a sharp 90-degree curve that led you back to the main highway. This was a gravel road, I should mention. At first, we liked to walk down the road and play in the creek. But then we started to notice how eerily quiet it was down there, and the bad feeling we got. We started feeling like we were being watched, and it was overwhelming. As the summer grew to a close, the sharecroppers moved off the land. The son of the sharecroppers told my brother and I that there was a young girl found slaughtered in the creek just a few weeks before my family purchased the farm. Her murderer was never found. That left us with an even more uneasy feeling. We began to notice how eerily silent it was, and the feeling of being watched began happening when we were down by the lake house. Actually, the feeling of being watched seemed to happen any time we were without adult supervision. One night, the goats and chickens were making an awful ruckus. My grandfather had been told by some other local farmers there was a massive cat snagging livestock from their herds. He immediately grabbed his .22 and told me to grab a flashlight. I obeyed and we were out the door. Once we had cleared both gates that led to the goat yard, things were silent except for the sounds of the creaking floorboards of the hayloft above the goat barn. We could hear something huge walking above our heads as we approached the barn. I think my grandfather felt the same feeling of dread that I did the closer we got. My grandfather leveled his weapon, and immediately there was a blood-curdling growl, howl, scream that reverberated our chests. I was frozen in place. My 10-year-old brain couldn't comprehend what we had just heard. The next memory is my grandfather screaming at me in a tone of voice I had never heard before. From him, nor after this occasion. "Run, kitten! Run, kitten!" Kitten was my nickname my grandparents called me. We both ran the 70 yards, jumped over the 2 gates, and back to the house in what felt like a lifetime. My grandfather never told me what he saw, and from that moment on until he died 6 years later, he never wanted us to go outside alone at night. Like I said, we never saw the thing, but the feeling and the sound we got from this thing was otherworldly. We lost a few goats that year and began keeping the mama and the babies on an enclosed back porch, just for the few weeks of their life in effort to keep them safe. Today's second subscriber encounter. Alright man, I'm going to give you the info on my encounter. In July of last year, I went up to southern Norway, where I have a little holiday cabin. The cabin's situated out and above a little town called Eve, approximately 65 kilometers from the port of Kristiansand, just to the north. To get to the cabin, you have to drive up from Eve. On a paved road which takes you up the hills, you pass lakes on the way and a handful of houses and lots of forest and waterways. My cabin is at the very end of the area, 16 kilometers into the wild. Besides one other cabin that's situated 500 meters away and only occupied from time to time, I'm all by myself out there. My cabin is above a small lake, resting on a slope. On the 3rd day of my arrival, I went outside onto the cabin's deck to have a cigarette. It was about 10 at night and still very light outside because in the summer months the sun really never goes down. I heard noises, water splashing, and grunts coming from the lake below. The shore's about 30 meters from the deck of the cabin. I walked to the edge of the deck to see what was going on because I was really freaked out. When I looked down to the shore, I saw hunched over a hairy creature trying to pull a dead moose onto the shore by its neck. The thing turned around and has apparently noticed me standing there looking at it. It swung its head around violently, giving me a grim kind of look, turned its back to me and casually ran into the bushes. The creature was about man-size, 180 centimeters or so. Weight, I would guess, no more than 250 pounds, had a protruding snout like a wolf, upright ears. Not too big and was covered in black and brown hair. Arms and legs were normal size, legs were straight, and the overall appearance were pretty slim. I went back inside of the cabin, panicked, and locked and barricaded the back door and back windows. I went for an axe that I kept in the utility room by the front door, sat in a chair by the back door. The only light on was the fireplace. I couldn't believe and make out what I had just seen, and I was freaked out, realizing that this far down south, there were basically no wolves or bears. 10 minutes in, I hear the most radical howls I'd ever heard. They sounded mad, crazed in a way. I didn't even want to attempt to get to the car, which was right outside of the main entrance. I was petrified and couldn't shut an eye a whole night. The howls and commotion outside in the bushes went on all night. The next day, I carefully left the cabin and went to the car and headed into town. Problem is I didn't have any internet connection out there, so I went straight to the police station to file a report on what I saw. The officials told me it must have been a big dog, trying to just put me off. They didn't laugh, as I expected. They did not look at me in the eyes either. They stared at each other and talked in Norwegian. They looked at each other in the eyes, however, seeming a bit nervous. I went outside because I was extremely pissed about getting put off. I received no copy of a report or anything like that. The last few days of my stay, nothing else happened except for the carcass of the moose had been picked up. Nothing left at the scene. I checked with a local and asked him if there were any bears or wolves this far south, just to confirm what I already knew. He replied no. Besides all that, I forgot to mention that the creature casually went off running on 2 legs. To this day, even though it had gotten better, I feel paranoid, even around familiar places like my home, yard, and whatnot. Today's third subscriber encounter. Hey Jeff, my encounter happened when my family was sharing residence with close friends, living in a very small town called Sayre, Pennsylvania. It was late summer of 1986, and I was 10 years old at the town. Sayre, Pennsylvania is so small it doesn't even have its own school, meaning the children of Sayre would have to travel to a nearby city called Athens to attend school. That being said, I remember one day towards the end of summer where I stayed home to help my mom with some necessary work around the house. And no, I was not happy being the typical 10-year-old. I wanted to be outside with my friends down the road. The people we were living with lived on the outskirts of Sayre on about an acre of land, and it had its own pond. They also had several dogs that did make a fair amount of noise. So when they first started barking, neither my mom nor I thought anything of it, because they never barked for very long at anything. However, when they kept barking for what seemed to be 15 minutes or so, and it intensified, my mom had enough and told me to see what was bothering them. I followed the sound of their barking as it was coming from the far side of the pond, about 80 feet from the house. When I got close, I could see that all the dogs were barking at the tree line on the other side, and they were focused on one specific area of the tree line. In spite of this, I yelled at them to shut up and calm down because I couldn't see anything that they might be barking at. When they wouldn't listen, I started to approach them to drag them away from the trees by force, thinking if I got them far away, they'd forget about the squirrel or whatever they were barking at. I got about 10 feet from them, and I could see a little deeper into the tree line at this point. The first indication something was seriously wrong was the rustling of the bushes. I froze in my tracks as the normal thoughts of predators that lived in the area started to cross my mind, and none of them would cause the reaction this thing got from the dogs that had been going crazy just moments before. I saw the bush that was almost as tall as I was move as something, I couldn't quite see at first, move through the tree line. When I heard the deepest growl I'd ever heard, and it seemed to last forever. I was terrified at this point, and the dogs started to whimper and yip. They were moving back and forth with their tails between their legs and their heads cowered. I did vaguely remember something someone told me to do when faced with a predator. And that was, you never turn and run. You always back away, throwing your arms up to make yourself look bigger. That must have either seemed like a challenge or extremely funny, because the thing stepped out where I could see most of it. It was covered in head-to-toe fur. That was almost black. It was so dark. It had a wolf-like head mounted on what seemed to be an almost normal human chest, if you ignored the fact its chest seemed distorted in that it looked like the abdomen was stretched in an unnatural length. It was standing upright on two legs rather than all fours. I would guess the thing was 7 to 8 feet tall. However, I could be wrong. I just remember thinking how big this thing was compared to me, and I was only 10 at the time. I do remember the last I saw of it was when it looked at me for a few minutes while sniffing the air a couple times. Then it did the last thing I was expecting. It gave me the same kind of smile a normal dog would. When they wouldn't listen, I started to approach them to drag them away from the trees by force, thinking if I got them far away, they'd forget about the squirrel or whatever they were barking at. I got about 10 feet from them, and I could see a little deeper into the tree line at this point. The first indication something was seriously wrong was the rustling of the bushes. I froze in my tracks as the normal thoughts of predators that lived in the area started to cross my mind, and none of them would cause the reaction this thing got from the dogs that had been going crazy just moments before. I saw the bush that was almost as tall as I was move as something, I couldn't quite see at first, move through the tree line. When I heard the deepest growl I'd ever heard, and it seemed to last forever. I was terrified at this point, and the dogs started to whimper and yip. They were moving back and forth with their tails between their legs and their heads cowered. I did vaguely remember something someone told me to do when faced with a predator. And that was, you never turn and run. You always back away, throwing your arms up to make yourself look bigger. That must have either seemed like a challenge or extremely funny, because the thing stepped out where I could see most of it. It was covered in head-to-toe fur. That was almost black. It was so dark. It had a wolf-like head mounted on what seemed to be an almost normal human chest, if you ignored the fact its chest seemed distorted, in that it looked like the abdomen was stretched in an unnatural length. It was standing upright on two legs rather than all fours. I would guess the thing was 7 to 8 feet tall. However, I could be wrong. I just remember thinking how big this thing was compared to me, and I was only 10 at the time. I do remember the last I saw of it was when it looked at me for a few minutes while sniffing the air a couple times. Then it did the last thing I was expecting. It gave me the same kind of smile a normal dog would, and disappeared into the woods. When it did that, the dogs all ran back to the house, and I took the hint from them and ran my ass off back to the house as well. By this time in my life, I had seen enough horror flicks to know without a doubt what I had just saw. I also knew no one would ever believe me. So, when my mom asked me what the problem was, I told her the neighbor's dog had run back around the house. And then I finally got control of the dogs. Bonus: non-subscriber encounter. For as long as I can remember, a creature has followed me. First, I'd like to describe this being as incredibly tall, horribly emaciated, long limbs that sharpen to points at the nails, and from the shoulders up it resembles a bear. Every time I've seen this figure, it's been at night, and while some of the features are horrifyingly distinguishable, shadows do obscure the finer details. However, I've never seen the reflection of eyes, and that scares me more than any of its other characteristics. Now I'll retell the most recent sighting, but bear in mind, no pun intended, situations such as this frequently happens. However, as I stated above, I have had the displeasure of seeing this beast for years, and it's never broken habit but once. I was driving home from a night of video games downtown at a friend's apartment around midnight, and all was normal until I exited the highway. I saw it near the dealership, but I kept driving because while I do not see this creature every night, it does keep me company probably every 3 to 4 nights. So while I'm not immune to the fear that it induces, I am slightly desensitized. However, I see it again near the gas station under the cover of shadow. Again, I saw it by my nearby high school, and I keep driving home. This thing's so fast that it's able to meet me effortlessly along the route and tease me. Whenever it's near, the sense of dread encapsulates me, and it's truly as though there are no other emotions beside primal fear, survival. I pulled into my driveway, and there it was across the street, standing near a neighbor's garden shed. Although it's been close enough to touch me once, it finds its strength to invade my nightmares and keep me company while I sleep. No one else I have met can see it or sense this monster's presence because it seems to wait until I'm alone before preying upon me. Also, whether perhaps noting, once I dreamt that the devil appeared to me and promised to rid me of this creature at the expense of my soul. Of course, I declined. But that could, of course, be chalked up to strange dreams. In all the years I have known this foul creature, it has never spoken nor gestured to me, only watched in silent patience. 3 incredible subscriber encounters. The first encounter, I want to let you guys know that this subscriber has reached out to me and told me that this happened to their grandfather a while ago, and that their daughter, apparently, every time they listen to one of these videos, yells "shall we" right when I do. So I kind of have a little smile on my face when I'm doing this. What a scary encounter. I mean, like I said, the ones that are the scariest are when you don't see the creature, you just hear it and you know it's there. Obviously, the grandfather saw something. If it was a big cat, I mean, yeah, a 22 is not going to do much, but take a pop shot at it before you run. The only other thing, like she said, was, it was something otherworldly. The second encounter, I mean, even the cops in Norway are evading questions about this creature. There's something going on, and the law knows about it, the government knows about it. They just don't want to face it. So, right there's more proof. The last encounter, wow, that kid is sure lucky to have this creature come out and then smile at you like a dog does. Now, I've heard a couple of other encounters where the Dogman does that, and it's like it just wants to, just show you, hey, I'm here and I'm gonna scare you a little bit, but nope, then I'm gonna run away. I think it's fascinating when that Dogman does that. The last encounter, the non-subscriber bonus, that one has got me shook a little. I mean, this guy's getting stalked by something, and I'm going to try to reach out to this person and find out where they are, because I don't know. If they're out west, I would almost say skinwalker, and you pissed somebody off. You did something not cool. Other than that, I've got the slightest clue. Maybe it's a Dogman and you just think it looks like a bear. I don't know. What do you guys think? With that, I'm going to bid you guys a farewell and work on some more encounters for tomorrow.